Stanley Levinson leaves the Communist Party formally. He founds the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is Martin Luther King's organization. He recruits King. He writes King's speeches. He manages King's organization.
It's written on Wikipedia.
And basically starts the civil rights movement. It is just a rebranding of the Communist Party USA. If you're graphing the social networks of the CPUSA, you will always find these like hereditary aristocrats on top. Jessica Mitford, she's really the social queen of American communism. She marries this guy named Bob Truehoff and runs labor law firm. So when Hillary Clinton graduates from Yale Law School, where did she go to work first?
Oh, no.
And it's like Barack Obama's connection to Bill Ayers. It's just like, yeah, let's talk about how many degrees of separation connect Vice President Kamala Harris to Jim Jones.
Jim Jones he's the guy who killed all those people in South America.
Jonestown. And we also are not told that Jim Jones was such a huge booster of the Soviet Union. The letter that Harvey Milk wrote to Jimmy Carter defending Jim Jones' right to take this child who was claimed by his mother from his father and taken to Jonestown, who later died at Jonestown. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Harvey Milk was such a monstrous character. So I think a lot of people don't realize this.
Boyfriend who he raped and then, killed himself.
Would you like to know more?
I really tried to find a good place to intro the script here, but the stuff said at the beginning keeps getting referenced later on, so you are going to get a stream of Curtis Yarvin thought in this, and it is a fantastic episode. I think one of our better episodes, just from an entertainment and informational perspective. If you don't know who Curtis Yarvin is, he's probably one of the most famous living political thinkers. You might also know him as Munchus Mulbug. He came up with the idea of the cathedral. He founded Urbit. And he's also a fervent monarchist.
With the assistance of 11 Labs, you can actually make me say things that I didn't, which opens up a really large new set of possibilities in creative podcast editing. Absolutely. You can just patch in things that sound almost like the person. The result is it's a useful use of AI. You just make them say what they should have said. Cut out those Tourette's moments, all those N-words, and
no, I'm adding all of those. That's the point, right? We're gonna have you talk like a gangster in this entire interview.
Yeah, exactly. You do the whole cut, and then the poor person is forced to claim, this ridiculous claim that these nice people edited the N-word into his track, and it's just a patently false claim. It's just like my account was hacked, right? Sure, yeah, exactly.
You were hacked.
Exactly. The Collins is,
I'm actually so glad that AI is getting this good, because when people catch me doing actually like horrifying stuff, I'm just gonna be like, oh, that was AI.
I know. It actually, what people don't understand is that in the long run, it actually is a privacy technology. It creates more privacy because the result is basically, seeing a video of someone now in the future is just going to be treated like you can, it's like showing someone a text file and saying they wrote this text file.
Exactly.
Yeah. So he's like,
maybe they did, maybe they didn't, right?
So the baby feast, I thought that was like our major, like under the cover thing of It Get Live, that we feasted on babies on the, the Black Moon. But no, baby feast, all in. Nobody will believe it.
The whole pronatalism thing is just because the babies are born doesn't mean you need to raise them. I mean, have you ever seen a zucchini that's full grown? It's disgusting, right? Actually, the zucchinis we buy in stores are baby zucchinis, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what a white coat is?
No.
A white coat. It's a baby harp seal. It's a baby harp seal, which is actually in its lanugo, which is the hair it grows within the womb, and it is beautiful, fluffy white stuff that works great in a coat, and it only lasts.
And these are the seals we club, right?
After they used to club. There's like a there's a resistance apparently to clubbing them at the moment, because they have these cute melting eyes, and they look up at you, when they're on the ice before you club them with these cute melting eyes, right?
I thought you were going to say we don't club them anymore. We shoot them.
The men who club them, these are the crudest of men. These are French Canadians. These are like people that even the French would reject, right? And they're clubbing these cute baby animals to death. Very desensitizing. Like, you can't trust a man like this in civilization ever again. They need to be kept out on the ice. And so in any case, you used to be able to buy these fluffy sealskin coats made from baby seal, obviously suitable only for women, although apparently seal fur is suitable for men as well. So at some point,
I've never seen it.
when I have actual money, I should try and go and buy an antique used old fur is surprisingly cheap, right? So maybe you can find like white coat baby harp seal, which no one has to be harmed for because it's vintage, right? The seal has already been clubbed, and no one is harmed by this, and you have this beautiful white fluffy coat.
Away. Yeah, no one wants furs because also like they smell weird after a while. It's just not great.
Yeah, well,
I
sure
have to
they
do the
can
intro
maintain.
here.
All right.
Okay,
you can use this material on the seals. You can use the seal.
No, all of this material is going to be used. I'm going to be talking about. It's actually primarily a video podcast. We do a lot of like clips and skits.
But your hair looks really good. I don't know what you're doing.
I had a supporter, paid for me to get a very expensive haircut in New York, and I've since maintained it. So it's just the right. It's the right look. It's the right design for me.
Yeah.
Do you want me to play the old hits? Should I talk about Urbit? Should I?
No, I know exactly what we're going to talk about. I want that whole speech about how Marxism is actually like this, how it became the culture of the ultra affluent in the United States, and how it took over that culture. And you had this conversation over breakfast, and I was just like, this is brilliant.
The first thing you have to understand about Marx is that Marx is an English gentleman. Okay. He's born in Germany. He is a Jew. He is part of the European world of the early 19th century, which is a profoundly Anglophile world. And it is a profoundly Anglophile world, both because English-speaking culture is beautiful and amazing, and so many great things have been created under English-speaking culture, but also because of the Battle of Waterloo. Otherwise, we would also all be speaking French, right? We thought we beat Hitler so that we would not have to speak this hard language, German. Actually, the defeat of Napoleon was the defeat of the sensitive and courtly language of French. So, essentially, the sort of the prehistory of the 20th century is the 19th century. And it's a relatively short amount of time. You may not know, do you know about the Tylers?
No.
So I believe 13th president, John Tyler, who later, I believe, became a Confederate senator. It used to be two, now only one. One of his grandchildren is alive today.
Wow.
Okay, and
so, this is a guy born in the 18th century who was the 13th president of the U.S. One of his grandchildren is alive today. Now, that is some serious longitudinal pronatalism right there.
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
Because it takes a couple of late in life childbearing experiences. Anyway, so my point is, this country ain't so old at all. Right. And when you look back at kind of the 19th century, which really starts with the American and French revolutions, the rest of the 18th century is a very foreign country to us, but it sort of comes into focus more for us and is easier to explain in modern terms, of course, as it goes into the 19th, which is the era of liberal revolutions. And that's another one of these cases where you edited 11 Labs had something to do with that. I didn't say that. And in any case, so because of, we can't ignore the role of Anglophilia in the French Revolution. It's huge. It's absolutely the thing. You have like the Revolution Society in London, which is doing exactly the same thing as like the Soviet simps in 1930 or the Ukraine simps now. They love that shit. It never dies, right? And hugely romantic because you have this energy of it's this telescopic philanthropy that Dickens talks about, where you care more about the people far from you. Remember the heat map? The heat map, the meme of the heat map. It's such a good meme.
Explain this meme. I'm gonna find this meme.
The heat map is something you see posted on certain areas of Twitter. I think I did a lot of popularize it, but it's actually from Nature. And it's basically a publication which shows that when you basically compare the level of the level of like concern for others that people have, in conservative, concern for others
Oh,
peaks
that
to the
heat
people
map where like
closest to you.
liberals like
It
love rocks and like conservatives love their
more
family.
than they love rocks more than grandma, right? You know, and of course their
Yeah.
love for rocks is an affectation and not real love. Nobody can really love a rock, right? You know, I
Except
guess
for
it's
our
easier
son,
probably.
Torsten.
Probably easier in some ways for women. Never mind. But you know, in any case,
Our children
no
are
one.
terrifically autistic. You might be surprised
Yeah,
how much they love rocks.
Yeah.
yeah. The
They love
thing I
rocks
say
like an
about
autistic kid loves trains.
Yeah.
the thing that I say about my almost 2-year-old is that when you give it an object he hasn't seen before, you always feel like he's observing it to see if it belonged to the previous Dalai Lama. And, you probably know that vibe, right? You know,
Yes.
it's a good.
Exactly the
Any
vibe,
case,
but
in
that is
any
a
case,
funny way to say it.
Yeah.
in any case, we go back to not actually believing in reincarnation. Let's get back to Marx. So the thing is, after the Battle of Waterloo, basically, in which is the first point at which England, you know,
Yeah.
the unipolar order begins with the Battle of Waterloo, right? And because then England becomes kind of clearly world primus inter pares, at least on the seas, right? And that creates, you know, because of, you know, there was an Arab philosopher who's Osama bin Laden, who said, you know, by nature, when we see a strong horse and a weak horse, we like the strong. So basically, there's a couple of different ways in which, let's call that Osama's rule, right? You know, and there's a couple of different ways in which Osama's law really, you know, kind of is relevant to the existence of the like the shit lib and the like original
I'm
shit
beginning to
lib that
understand how
Marx
you got
was.
so canceled.
And you know, because I speak sensitively about the great Arab philosophers, and you know the that's so in any case, Marxism. So basically, Marxism comes out of this world that Dickens is caricaturing with the telescopic philanthropy. Specifically, what Dickens is talking about, you know, in his little cameo of Mrs. Jellyby in Bleak House, who cares much more about liberating the natives of Boreal-Bulaga, you know, than her own children in her house, which she leaves uncleaned, is that she's characterizing a particular piece of kind of shitlib colonialism or missionary colonialism, as I say when my voice is not being faked by 11 Labs. And this missionary colonialism is what rules the earth today, basically. It's the spirit of the United fucking Nations, which is also, you know, it's ultimately a Kantian spirit. It's like this sort of Europeanization of basically originally British modes of thought that we can trace all the way back to the late 18th century. And so what happens is that sort of Anglophilic thought becomes, you know, deracinated. It becomes separated from its roots in Christianity, and it basically becomes this kind of, but it still very much is rooted in not just Christianity, but like English mainline Protestantism. Dissenter Protestantism is sort of its deepest roots, you know, going back to the 17th and even the 16th century. But you know, it first becomes really visible in this kind of like in this sort of poisonous spirit of Marx. And I think that Marx's real innovation was to basically kind of take, so if you look at the way the founders write, for example, about political parties, which they call factions, or even the way they use the word democracy, you know, the idea that, say, you know, all rationalists, I bet you have a lot of rationalists out there, they all know about Duverger's law, which says that most political systems favor a two-party kind of structure. And if you told the people that wrote the Constitution that the US would have a two-party structure for its entire operating period as a constitution, they would basically be like, wow, the Constitution has actually been outside its operating engineering envelope for its entire time, because it's basically It's expecting like questions to actually be solved by like debate among statesmen in the Senate. Right. It's like operating in a completely different universe
Yeah.
than, than it is today. Right. And so there's no debate in the Senate. What the hell? Right. The House of Representatives, which is supposed to be the voice of the mob, of the people, of the turbulent orators, has a 98% incumbency rate. The Senate is 90%. And plus an insane seniority system that is nowhere mentioned in any fucking constitution. Right. It was written down by God. Right.
Given that around half of the people who watch our show are outside of America, I'm going to need to provide some context here, I think. So the founding fathers of America, when they were building the Constitution, one thing that they were very concerned about was that a party system may end up forming in our country. And so they built the Constitution to prevent that. Now, if you are familiar with American politics, you'd be like, but doesn't America have a very strong two-party system? And it's yes, it does. And it had one from almost the very first elections we held. So the American Constitution failed within the lifetime of the founding fathers, and it has been operating outside its meant to operate boundaries for a very, very long time. In addition to that, things like the Senate were supposed to be where smart people would go up and debate and compromise and come up with plans for things. We do not have like real debates where people are being swayed by other people's words on the Senate floor anymore. That is not the way the Senate functions. So again, operating outside its parameters. And in our book, The Pragmatist's Guide to Governance, or that piece that The Guardian did on our city-state, one, we point this out, but the other thing that we point out is sometimes the form that a thing collapses into is more stable than the state it was designed to operate within. I am reminded here of a collapsed cathedral where I went to college at St. Andrews, and the cathedral was in its collapsed state much longer than it was ever in its built state, and that's because the forms that things collapse into are often self-reinforcing if the building is still standing for like 100, 200 years. And I think that that's sort of what happened with the U.S. government.
And so, but I digress. What Marx's innovation was, that he kind of looked at the violence and the conflict and the dysfunction that's inherent in these Republican forms of government and said, no, this is not a bug, this is a feature. Or rather, it's kind of this like class war stage is something we have to go through. Yeah. And so he's kind of goes from this kind of benevolent telescopic philanthropy to this kind of violent telescopic philanthropy, where he basically he goes from wanting to civilize the nation, the peoples of Boreo Bulaga. Again, this is based on, I'm sorry, I digress. This was based on the Niger expedition. That's spelled Niger. Niger, right?
Okay.
You know the word Niger, the Niger expedition. Thank you, 11 Labs, for fixing that. And the Niger expedition, total failure. They were going to basically civilize the natives of the lower Niger Delta and teach them to grow cotton in like the 1830s, 1840s. I forget the moment. Total disaster. Yeah. Ridiculous, cartoon third world shit show of an experience, right? And so, Marx goes from this sort of benevolent missionary imperialism to this kind of violent missionary imperialism, where you start to see people like getting actually excited by these kinds of barbarities that they sponsor and getting excited by the class war that they sponsor. It's this sort of extremely refined pleasure, which is so it starts to become this kind of psychopathic thing. If you basically supported Stalin in America in the 30s, right? You basically you always had this edge of like, I'm so much more real for you than you, because I understand the need to kill people and you don't. And like, I understand that you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. I understand,
really fascinatingly, in the follow-ups to this election cycle, is a lot of leftists are like, we need to go back to being a party of the working class, but the working class is trans people, like, I'm like,
they were never a party of the working class. So the thing is, the idea that go back to is a complete illusion. They were always a party of the aristocrats And going all the way back to Marx and his fucking sugar daddy fucking Engels, who, ran a factory and supported this very, profligate, person in his sterile intellectual career. Marx was a great writer, to be fair, really amazing writer, but like, is sort of breaching the barrier to that evil and like saying, no, this thing that you've called evil is actually both inevitable and in its own way good. And of course, Marx would have loved to play this game where he's like, well, I'm not really saying this is good. I'm not really excited by, the talk of like, gouging your eyes out and jacking off all of your corpse. It's just a metaphor, that I'm like saying, and like the he's like the creepy, kid who writes the creepy short stories in the high school, English class, right? And so he's doing this
school
kind
shooter
of
vibes.
yeah, school shooter vibes, right? And so the thing is, you have these school shooter vibes that like extend all the way down to like Franz Fanon, right? Who's just like, wants to kill like colonialists, right? And gets a substantial amount of that work done.
Who is
And,
sorry, people won't know this other character you named. What is he famous for?
who is Franz Fanon? Fanon he was supported by the CIA. He was a communist, but I repeat myself. He was he was an anti-colonialist, sort of early, basically woke thinker from the 1950s. This is early sort of
American?
Gramscianism. No, some kind of Europe, international European.
Huh.
The funny thing about Franz Fanon is his name is not spelled Franz, it's spelled Frantz, but it so happens that misspelling it Franz without the T is an error we find in both Barack Obama and Bill Ayers.
Wait. So both of them
Or the
quoted
works
this guy?
credited to both of those authors. So Franz Fanon is like universally, he's an early anti-colonialist thinker. Like he's absolutely completely orthodox. And he's basically like, kill the colonialist babies and rip them from their mother's wombs or whatever. I don't know what he says exactly, but like there's like heavy bloodthirsty energy there. I mean,
For some examples of exact quotes, we have violence is a cleansing force. It frees the native from his inferiority complex and from his despair and inaction. It makes him fearless and restores his self-respect. For the native, life can only spring again out of the rotting corpse of the settler. At a level of individuals, violence is a cleansing force. He also argued that anyone who was a colonized person could enact any form of violence they wanted against people who he deemed as colonizers without any moral repercussions or moral downsides.
And Obama is supporting him and Bill Maher is supporting him?
Bill Ayers.
Bill Ayers. Okay, whatever.
The Weather Underground guy. The Weather Underground
Oh,
guy.
okay.
Who,
Obama's
according to
mentor
many
guy,
reliable, reports, was Obama's mentor and wrote his books. Right. And so we see this trace of like this kind of sweet tooth for blood that appears in these people again and again. And it's like they have a sweet tooth for power. At first they want to be matter, they want to be listened to, they want to have an impact, they want to change the world in a good way. You give them more and more power, or they like their results are worse and worse, and eventually their kind of sweet tooth for power turns into a real sweet tooth for blood, right? And the thing is,
connect here. Sorry, before you go further, because I want to make sure this is the only episode where the guest talks more than me. I love this. I'm gonna get so much.
This is how it should be, Malcolm. This is how it's supposed to be.
But hold on. I want to make a bridge here. I want you to talk about this because you're doing a very good job of connecting modern political figures with communists of the past. And over this breakfast when you were talking, you did a really good job of connecting Hillary Clinton and Marxism, as well as this like actor family in the 50s who were supposed to be Marxists, and then everyone thought they weren't Marxists.
Yeah. I was so couple of different things there. So the thing is that the separation between like do you know the biological theory of cladistics? It's like the way you classify.
What are cladistics?
Cladistics is a concept in evolutionary biology.
Okay.
That basically says here is the only way to do categories in things that are descended in what's broadly called a genetic way, as both genes and languages are.
Okay.
Okay, so for example, in both genes and languages, it is a classification error to have the classifications that are purely based on phylogeny. For example, if you have a category of animal that flies and you call it a bird bat bug, a bird bat
Uh-huh.
bug is a false category.
Uh-huh.
Similarly, if you have language, if you have a category that is a negative predicate, things that are not birds, that is also a false category. Actually,
Mm,
if you're really looking at the evolutionary structure, you realize that birds should be grouped with dinosaurs and not with bats.
right.
Okay, but
Yeah.
any kind of naive thinking makes you confuse them with bats. Now, the thing
Mm,
is, when we're looking at, so that's one way of looking, when we use words like Marxist or liberal or whatever, that's one way of looking at what are the distinctions here. Another way of
mm,
looking at, say, how do we use these words is saying, okay, let's look at the social graphs. So let's, for example, compare, say, the social graph of Democrats to the social graph of Republicans. In
mm.
general, what we would see is that Democrats are tolerated at a Republican event, but Republicans are not tolerated at a Democratic event.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, that is an arrow. We would see the same relationship with respect to Republicans and white nationalists. They would love to
Yeah.
be recruit some mainstream figures from the GOP. They'd love it, let's say, Kevin McCarthy showed up at a Klan rally. He would be accepted. But if David Duke showed up at a GOP meeting, he would not be accepted. They would, let's say
Right.
Kevin McCarthy comes, he's in his like hood thing, like it's a big secret, right? Former House leader, actually also Grand Wizard. Now it's time to unmask himself. He's been working for the organization all along, right?
Oh
You can see it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the thing is, when we establish that relationship between liberals and communists, what do we see? Do we see any social exclusion there? Might be
Yeah.
some situations in which the communists exclude the liberals. There's no situation where you're just too much of a leftist to come to my party. Your Maoism is totally acceptable. Did you not realize that Mao killed 30 million people and you're wearing a Mao shirt? No, we can't have you at this party. Okay, that does not happen.
Yeah.
You can't
That's a good
realize that
point.
Che Guevara was a murderer. You can't come in your
No.
Che shirt. I have a Che shirt. Nobody complains. Okay.
Yeah.
So so what you're seeing is that that concept doesn't exclude, like, that's not a meaningful differentiation. Now, the idea that you can't distinguish between a liberal and a communist, that there's no fundamental distinction, places you to the right of the whole Republican Party since the early 1950s. Because,
Hmm.
in fact, it even places you to the right of Joe McCarthy. Because Joe McCarthy, of course, insisted that you could tell the difference between a liberal and a communist. Joe McCarthy
Hmm.
was not out to purge the government of liberals. If he
Yeah.
had been, he would have realized that he had a much harder problem and he was not actually solving the real problem that he was supposed to be solving.
Huh.
Let me
This.
give you a very specific, here's what you were fishing for. Let me give you a very specific example of this. Did I or did I not talk at this breakfast about the name Stanley Levinson?
I don't know if you did.
I might have mentioned the
Continue.
name Stanley Levinson.
I don't
I
have good
rather
memory. Okay, you're going so fast here. I couldn't keep it all down. This is
it's
why
all
you
the
need to be on the show.
it's all the drugs you did back in the 60s. In any case, Stanley Levinson. So, one of the things that in order to maintain the separation between communists and liberals, you have to airbrush out of American history, is that America also has a civil rights movement in the 20s and the 30s. And that civil rights movement is unequivocally part of the Communist Party USA, which is at its
Oh.
high point in those periods.
Oh, I remember this. This
Self-determination
is
in
the
the
guy
Black
who
Belt.
ran all these organizations. Okay, continue. This was really cool.
The National
Okay.
Negro Congress,
Uh-huh.
the thing is basically the Highlander
That they were
Folk School.
communist?
They were they were communists, right? The CPUSA was a huge
No, he's
freaking thing.
actually got
Yes,
receipts. I looked all this up afterwards.
Yes.
Continue.
Oh.
Yes, they were communists, right? So the thing is, after the U.S., the U.S. has a very different relationship with the Soviet Union in the 1930s than in the 1950s. Okay, in between is the 1940s when they're beloved brothers in saving the world from Hitler. Then suddenly we go to war with them right after the war. What the fuck?
Mhm.
The Korean War, we're
Mhm.
fighting our old friends. Like, what
Right.
happened? This is super weird. This is basically what Orwell is talking about in the end of 1984. Right?
Huh.
Somehow people just like retconned this stuff and weren't like, wow, it is super weird that we were allied with Stalin and now Stalin is Hitler. That's super strange. And you read the newspapers from 1944 and they have to totally change their frickin' line. Right. So, let me give you another interesting fact. This is the fact of Stanley Levinson. Stanley Levinson, who might well have met my grandparents as a Jewish communist in New York in the 40s and 50s. Stanley Levinson is a person who had two lives. So, and this is all, extremely well, this is not controversial in the slightest.
Okay.
This is all things that all historians agree on. They just don't really want you to talk about it. Until 19, he is essentially the CFO of the Communist Party USA. He's
Wow.
running its treasury. And then in 1956, so the party has several steps in its decline. One of them is the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact.
This was the non-aggression pact between the Nazis and the communists, or between Nazi Germany and communist Soviet Union.
Sort of recovers from that, not quite as well as it should have. That's 39, of course. Then the start of the Cold War damages it again, and the Korean War damages it. And the final blow that really renders it a totally fringe organization of no real relevance is 56 and the Hungarian Revolution and Khrushchev's secret speech in which he denounces Stalin.
Hmm.
Okay, leaves it really hard to be super faithful after that. Somehow my grandparents managed, Mandy did not. In any case, in 1956, Stanley Levinson decides time for a new gig.
Mhm.
So he leaves the Communist Party formally. It's not like he goes before McCarthy and tells the Senate everything. Oh no, he does something else. He starts the civil rights movement. To be exact, he founds the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is Martin Luther King's organization. He recruits King.
Whoa.
He writes all of King's speeches. He
Yeah,
manages King's
it's written on
organization.
Wikipedia. He's the speechwriter.
Whoa.
Like, this isn't something he's making up as like a
It's
Peter.
it's not something. It sounds like some wild shit I'm making up. This is just fucking history, man. He creates King. He finds this basically black dude who's gotten a PhD in plagiarism and has a rich, compelling, preacherly oratorical voice. And basically starts the civil rights movement. And essentially, Americans are never told that it is just literally a rebranding of the Communist Party USA. They try to keep, there's other leading figures are also leading communists, so essentially, a few years after what the Red Scare does is it's essentially like removing your prostate when you have prostate cancer. Okay, well, actually, no, it wasn't even removing the prostate. We're just going to like jab it 40 or 50 times with a toothpick. And, what that's going to do is that's going to result in basically spreading cancer cells around your body. And only by detailed DNA examination can you see that this like pain you feel one day in your shoulder, which is actually a tumor growing in the marrow that's going to crack your bone open, like you're eating ribs, is actually something that came from your prostate. And that's
Oh,
that's a result of the Red Scare not going far enough.
hold on, quick side note, because when I was researching this, the way that you really convinced me is you're like, look up the Wikipedia article.
Look up, I'll tell it. Look up the Wikipedia for Stanley Levinson. It tells you that he created the Southern Christian Leadership Council. Look up the Wikipedia page for the Southern Christian Leadership Council. Control F, Stanley Levinson. You won't find it.
Oh.
That's like one of your do you know when like Truman in the Truman Show sees that like there's like the edge of the world is actually like made of like pieces of canvas and they're like stitches in the canvas, right? How do you stitch that one up? Right? The thing is, so here's another fact that you may not be aware of.
Wait. Hold on.
Progressive.
Before
Yeah.
I don't even remember what it was.
Here's another.
I forgot.
No, I'm gonna inflict this on you, Malcolm. You're just gonna deal with it. So, have you ever heard the word progressive? Well,
Yes.
the thing is, what's funny is my grandparents parents who I know only through my parents were actual card-carrying members of the Communist Party USA for 50 years. I'm not sure what happened to the
Okay.
cards, but I'm sure they had actual cards.
I should clarify that he means this literally. Communists during this period, you had to buy and pay a subscription for membership to the party, and you were not considered a member if you were not paying. And it was an incredibly clandestine thing. It was very, very secretive, and you could have your card taken away if you got in trouble with the party. And this could, if you were in some industries like in Hollywood, absolutely destroy your career.
The word that they always used two words. They used the word communist and they used the word progressive. The word progressive was used universally to avoid outing people for any member or supporter of the party. This
So
is
it's
the
a
way the word
euphemism
has
for
been used
communism.
and has been since about 1930. Before then, you have like Teddy Roosevelt, who's actually kind of more of a fascist. Right. One thing you can go back and read to convince yourself of this is two wonderful publications. One of them is The New Masses,
Okay.
beautifully archived on Marxists.org, since we're on a Marx kick today.
Well, there we
Beautifully
go.
archived on Marxist.org. And it's basically the New Yorker, but for communists in the 1930s, which is to say the New Yorker, basically, but a little more doctrinally orthodox, and the other is The Communist, which is the journal of the Communist Party USA. And you
Okay.
can look at those and you can see the way they use the word progressive. And you can see the way that is basically a term for like one of us, our guy. It basically means slash our guys, if you've seen the term. It means slash our guys for Marxists when they had to be a little bit in the closet, only a little bit in the 30s. Right. And so essentially, as the old left, which is a centralized organization under the CPUSA, becomes the anarchic, metastatic, decentralized, universal new left, which becomes wokeism, or as some call it, progressivism, appears, it's like you can trace this root back to the 20s and 30s. It's literally 100 years old.
Well,
Moreover, if you've heard of the practice, well, let me just finish because I'm really trying to blow your minds as hard as I can at this point. Just to finish, this practice of canceling people is actually a Communist Party practice. And so, for example, in 1946, I think, Stalin, because the Cold War is starting, breaks with the American leadership of the Communist Party USA, which is under a man named Earl Browder.
Okay.
Amazing guy. And Earl Browder has this wonderful line, which he says, communism is as American as apple pie, which I believe to be true. In any case, Browder is running basically the Popular Front line, which is part of the alliance with FDR. That line has to break. The easiest way to break it is to fire the head of the CPUSA from Moscow. This is highly disturbing to Americans, but nonetheless, it gets done. Browder has to be fired. He has to be accused of something, and his people have to be accused of something. And one of his people is this woman named Bella Dodd, who, unlike Stanley Levinson, actually really does break with the party, goes, to the FBI, et cetera, tells everything she knows, writes a book called School of Darkness, very interesting book. And in School of Darkness,
I'll be back soon. By the way, I told you this would be an entertaining topic.
Holy smokes.
Isn't
I mean,
it
and
like-
I've been wondering why, because it's still like, I couldn't get wait, why is Black Lives Matter so Marxist? Why is civil rights communism?
Why did they
they should have
culture first? One
this shouldn't be related. And it's like, oh no, the guy who was the communist guy is then just decided to do civil rights.
But the thing what? Is that Black culture used to be, if you go back to the 60s, it had half the number of out-of-marriage births as white culture. Now 70% of Black kids are born without a
and it's just because a bunch of communists were like, we now own civil rights, we're gonna do civil rights now, and that is insane.
It is because Martin Luther King sold out the Black culture by acting as a mouthpiece for this guy.
That is so crazy.
That change the guy who used to be the treasurer of the American Communist Party
then just did all his speech writing, and oh my gosh, that is wow. But it explains so much. So,
by the way, Curtis Yarvin, he's not like the other guests we've had on.
What a dude.
Dominating. Curtis Yarvin, it's like us setting back and he's having a rant.
He did, but they're good rants, Malcolm.
They are good rants. I like it.
Top drawer.
But yeah, I
But
actually
like, I
I'm
just
thinking about
didn't
how
know. I didn't know
messy-
how deep it was. Like, just how deep the communism goes. It's like communism all the way down. What is going on? What is our
Oh no, so
country?
no, you haven't heard his connections with Hillary Clinton yet. It's
Oh,
bad.
I want to hear it. I hope he gets a cord. He needs to get a
But no, so it gets crazier. So like I love that like Curtis Yarvin, he comes on, we're like trying to prep him to like do like an intro. Like, okay, this is what does well on YouTube. He's like, fuck it, I'm just starting. Like, I don't get a chance to introduce him. I don't get a chance to promote anything. He's just like, I'm fucking starting this.
He just has to like drop truth bomb after truth bomb. We've been Dresden. Like, I don't even know anymore.
Are you Dresden with
My
truth
reality
bombs?
is burning. It's on fire.
So that is a good to say. I like that, and I like you. You are amazing.
I love you too, but I'm a little shook, Malcolm. That was
Your reality
what?
was Dresden
But
with truth
like,
bombs.
but whoa.
You see, I was like recording. I was like, oh, I could do a good episode on this. I could do a good episode.
Yeah,
on
but
this.
you like there were so many receipts, you had no more room in like your note document.
Yeah, I was
anymore.
like, shit.
I
just,
did
like,
too
finish
many
go
names.
on. By the way, for
How do
people who
you
don't
spell
know,
it?
Curtis Yarbin is a friend of ours. We talk with him a lot. When we were at conferences and stuff. Like every time we're at a conference, like it started, we're like cold acquaintances. We're like, oh, I know who you are and you know who I am. But I think we've been at enough conferences. I feel very comfortable calling him a friend now. We got him back.
Return. I have returned. All right. So I was telling the story of Bella Dodd, right?
Yes.
You got the Bella Dodd content. So Bella Dodd is on the Politburo, and she's one of Browder's people, and gotta go. Sometimes you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, right? And what's interesting is how they get rid of her, though, because they basically try her in front of a kangaroo court for racism. They didn't even use the word racism. It was racial chauvinism or white chauvinism, maybe. But basically, she was accused of being racist to her Puerto
Who did
Rican
this?
building
The Congress
superintendent.
or
The Communist Party. So
Okay.
basically, there was one place where you could be canceled for racism,
And it
in
was with the Communist Party.
1948, and it was being in the Politburo of the Communist Party USA.
They
Right.
did it
And
first.
so, yeah. And so, you can go and find basically, it's just like people write these fucking books like The Origin of Woke or whatever,
Yeah.
which start in like 2012 or even 1965 or something, right?
Yeah.
As if you couldn't find, there's this insane book that W.E.B. Du Bois
Dubois.
wrote.
Yeah.
Du Bois, not Dubois. Du Bois.
Really? No.
And the like, and which is called Dark Princess, and it's this insane like anti-colonialist fantasy, like
Oh,
just
it sounds
just
like a
bad. It's like a
BDSM chicklet.
yeah,
But
yeah,
okay.
yeah, and it has that element to it, right? I think, and it's like it's kind of pulpy, and it's not good, which is why.
but so
why it won't be
who's referenced this book? What's the relevance?
This was a review. I only found this book in a review by, I believe, Wyndham Lewis from the 1930s. Wyndham Lewis is very
I gotta
prescient.
find
and
some quotes from this.
Yeah.
By the way, Simone described this when you were gone because we kept recording. She goes, she's been, what is it, firebombed like Dresden with truth bombs on this episode.
Right.
She's
right,
recovering.
right. And
She's
so,
in shock.
yeah,
In
and so, yeah, it drives you. You have to struggle a little to keep your sanity, right? And the
That's a
thing is,
lot.
basically, the truth about history is that basically, like, QAnon is right in spirit. Okay, it's wrong about everything, but like in spirit, like
the thought that counts.
understanding that like this is not like your mother, like this is a demonic organism from outer space. Like that's the thing to really understand. It's like I was seeing someone writing about like early, sort of the weirdness of 2020 and like the whole like rupture with reality.
Yeah.
That I think a lot of, smart liberals, like certainly including, for example, my ex, like got into, we're just like, well, the way I saw one person describing it is it's basically like, imagine like you're like a kid, right? you know, you're doing your like kid thing, and then your mother like unzips her skin and she's a robot. And then your best friend's you know, mother unzips her skin and she's also a robot. It actually turns out that all the moms are robots, and everyone just sort of keeps carrying on like that's normal, right? Okay, everybody's mom is a
No,
robot.
that was
You know?
that was so COVID.
Yeah.
Like it was
You
like,
know?
Like,
oh,
okay.
so we're just like lying. The media
is
just
our life
lying.
now.
Yeah, right. I mean, the thing that I love is actually no one knows where the 6 feet thing came from. Like,
Really?
and it seems to be some
So
suggestion
social
that it was
distancing just
actually
like came out
this
there.
came up with this number, right? And there seems to be some evidence. I heard somewhere that it was part of some like 11th grade science fair project that came up with this number for like social distancing.
Checks out.
Right, you know,
that totally sounds right.
and then they completely lied about this whole concept of like droplets versus airborne for like a year, or like the way year and a half. Remember how COVID wasn't airborne, it was spread only by droplets? And
Yeah.
you're just like, what is the, you know, what is the difference? And it turned out to like make no sense, and actually there's no difference. It was just some like shitty research from the 1960s, you know. Or how actually, you know, a part of the resistance to declaring it airborne seems to date all the way back to a reaction in medical culture against miasma theory. And because miasma theory, you know, the idea that,
Yeah.
right, was
Like
completely
smells and bad
untrue.
odors and
Right. The
yeah.
idea that things could be spread in an airborne way, like, even though
Yeah.
this is obviously the case for so many things, like sort of, it was just weird. It was just like weird internal biases in the medical system.
Yeah, like, oh, what do you want me to do?
starting
Get
with-
out a plague mask?
Starting with
Put
the
flowers
insane
in it?
idea that it's really important to protect us from bat viruses by going to southern China and collecting all the bat viruses and modifying them to see if we can make them more dangerous.
I
Right,
mean,
which is
Right,
basically
that
what
seems
the,
like a
the U.S.
great
government
idea.
was funding. Right, it seems like a great idea, right? You know, and like imagine like trying to get that past like a venture capitalist, like say Mark Andreessen. Like Mark is suddenly in charge of funding science, right? And you're just like, well, I think what we need to do is go and collect all the bat viruses and see if we can make them more dangerous in a lab in China.
What do you mean by that? Do you mean like
Well, so
this was
here's-
perhaps there's a chance that this was created in a lab?
Novel respiratory coronavirus overtaking Wuhan, China. What do? Oh, you know who we could ask? The Wuhan Novel Respiratory Coronavirus Lab. The disease is the same name as the lab. That's just a little too weird, don't you think? And then they ask those scientists, they're like, you work at the Wuhan Respiratory Coronavirus Lab. How did this happen? And they're like, a pangolin kissed a turtle. And you're like, no, the name of your lab. If you look at the name, let me see your business card. Show me your business card. Oh, I work at the coronavirus lab in Wuhan. Oh, because there's a coronavirus loose in Wuhan. How did that happen? Maybe a bat flew into the cloaca of a turkey and then it sneezed into my chili, and now we all have coronavirus. Like, come on. Okay.
I mean,
And you know,
Explain to me why they thought that was a good idea. I guess, like, conceptually, I don't get why anyone thought that was a good idea.
because you have to basically be zoomed in really, really closely. Because what actually happened in terms of the history of that event is, first of all, SARS-1 happens.
yeah.
And SARS-1 is a completely legitimate zoonosis that, and actually you can watch this wonderful Steven Soderbergh film, Contagion, which you probably saw at some point. It's about COVID, but it was made before COVID was released. You know, which is super fun. And it like is completely the virus in Contagion is a bat coronavirus
Yes.
that goes into a zoonosis. Because what happens is the SARS-1, which actually gets into humans, kills like 100 people, but isn't really contagious enough to spread that well, though it's very dangerous, is a problem, right? There's clearly a problem of bat coronaviruses mutating to affect people.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It happens.
Yeah.
Because it's a real problem, guess what? You can get a grant to study it. And so that creates this huge, imagine if you'd been researching in this broad area, here's this minor curiosity. It fucking explodes. It's like your startup took off. It's incredible. Right.
Yeah.
And so because of that incredible thing, you have this boom mentality, suddenly this thing that you happen to specialize in because your like advisor had some kind of like furry bat fetish or something. And you're the world's biggest expert in bat coronaviruses because of this weirdo. Right. And you're just like, fuck my life. And then suddenly it's a huge thing, which killed 100 people and could have killed 100,000. And you're
Yeah.
like, this is a serious thing, right? And so we need to defend the world against these viruses. And actually, the funniest thing about this story is that, the main company, I use that word advisedly, the main contractor behind it was this group, EcoHealth Associates. And
Huh.
EcoHealth, run by the notorious Peter Daszak, was
Notorious
actually
why?
Yeah. Why?
because he was the ran EcoHealth, and he was the one who sponsored all of this research and funded the Predict study, in which the lab in Wuhan was working from.
Okay,
This
continue.
was this was not Chinese research. This was American research being done
In China.
largely to save money, but also because there were many Chinese grad students who needed work in China.
Interesting.
Right. And the funniest thing is, do you know the name?
We don't know any names.
He was, I grew up in reading a lot of Commonwealth books. He was huge in the Commonwealth recently.
Huh.
There was an HBO show about the Durrells in Corfu or something. His brother is Lawrence Durrell. And I love these Gerald Durrell books because he basically went around collecting animals from the decaying British Empire and taking them, cute, fuzzy little animals like little lemurs and things, and taking them back to his zoo in Jersey, not New Jersey, but Jersey, to breed and restore, save these populations, which were all about to be eaten for bushmeat, as Frantz Fanon rips the British Empire apart, right? And so he saves them, and so saving cute little animals is something that old ladies will contribute to. And so he founds an organization called the Wildlife Trust, which specializes in these ecological expeditions to save cute little animals. Well, a young wildlife biologist named Peter Daszak realizes, while working at the Wildlife Trust, that actually, while people love to give money to save cute baby animals, governments love to give serious amounts of money to stave off important public health problems such as bat coronaviruses. So it goes from basically finding, just due to the incentives of the situation, this one organization goes from saving the cute baby lemurs to collecting all the bat coronaviruses.
Yeah.
Okay, because they could be a threat, so we have to predict
But
their
why
emergence.
did they make them more dangerous?
The monetary incentive is there because there's
Very
money that's
simple,
put
very
risk.
simple. Okay, so basically you want to show, the point of your paper is to show that this is a problem, so the government will give you more money. Well, these are bat viruses, right? They don't naturally affect humans. They're just sitting there doing the things, every bat has 10 of these fucking viruses, right? Which fucked up all our lives for 2 years, killed millions of people, right? But they don't naturally do that, because they naturally infect bats. But the thing is, they could mutate. They change around, they become different things, right? And that happens in
So he
nature.
was
But
just trying to show how they
takes a long
could be
time.
dangerous.
It takes a long time. It takes a long time for them to do this accidentally. But the thing is, if we do it on purpose, we can show how it could happen accidentally.
Yeah.
And that basically helps us understand how to, I don't know, something. It's like, imagine you have a child, you have a number of children. You imagine your oldest child, you come home and you find him and he's setting fire to the kitchen curtains. And you're just and you're like, Henry, what are you doing? And and he's like, well, statistics show that, many fires, how domestic fires start in the kitchen. So, what would we do, for example, if those curtains caught fire?
Yeah, let's figure out the
out?
plan.
Could we get out? Could the dog get out? Right? And when you're at the dog get out, you realize that just the teenage years of raising this organism are going to be like anything you ever considered experiencing, right? We're already, and we need to talk about Kevin Church.
We're running out of time, and I need to get to the end of this. I need to get to this famous actor couple who turned out to be real communists, who everyone thought were pretend communists, and then 2, Hillary Clinton's connections to all this.
Oh, Hillary Clinton's connection to all this. So Hillary Clinton's connection to all of this is very simple. So I'm not sure if you mean which actor couple you mean, because they were all everyone.
There was
cool
a famous actor couple that were jailed. And
Sorry, what I was getting wrong is they weren't actors. I was thinking of, because he had told me about this that I didn't know, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, sort of the faces of communist hysteria, who ended up being executed for being communist sympathizers, and were the only people in the United States executed for being communist sympathizers. And they maintained their innocence throughout the entire trial, and it was this huge scandal. And now we know from declassified documents that they weren't just communist sympathizers, they were actively spying for the Soviet Union and actively spying on the Manhattan Project for the Soviet Union. So they were traitors to the country in a way that could have gotten innumerous Americans killed.
Well, the Hollywood 10, for example, which might be part of what you're talking about,
Yeah.
they were more screenwriters, and they were actually the leaders of the Communist Party in Hollywood, which had
okay.
basically been a CPUSA. Basically, CPUSA had been acting as a closed shop union for all the screenwriters of all the films that all Americans watched for 20 fucking years. So if you want to talk about like, propaganda or like programming people, right, and they would only do things that were basically, within the Overton window. Their business was pushing the Overton window. You might have, if you saw the great Coen Brothers movie Hail Caesar, you might have seen that
Okay, let's
kind
do
of
the
parody
Hillary
that
thing.
comes in.
Go over Hillary.
Okay,
How
the
was
Hillary thing. So
Okay,
very,
Hillary.
very simple. So the doyenne of the CPUSA, because she had this incredible English aristo vibe, was Jessica Mitford, known as Decca Mitford. And Decca Mitford comes over to the U.S. shortly before the war, and then her husband, Esmond Romilly, is killed in the Battle of Britain. And so she's a very popular woman about town, being single, and so if you're doing a sort of graphing the social networks of the CPUSA, you will always find these like hereditary aristocrats on top. I mean, I can't imagine, what Jessica Mitford's accent was like, and her sister's a duchess, right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So she's really the social queen of American communism. Well, the second husband who she marries is a guy named Bob Truhoft. And Bob Truhoft runs the leading West Coast labor law firm, which means basically runs the leading communist law firm.
Yeah,
on the
power
West Coast.
couple. Okay.
Runs the leading communist law firm on the West Coast. So when Hillary Clinton graduates from Yale Law School, where did she go to work first?
Oh no.
Why, for Bob Truhoft's firm.
Oh
Now,
God.
either she had no idea, having written her senior thesis at Wellesley on Saul Alinsky, either she had no idea, or, it's just like this stuff is so completely blatant and out in the open, right? And it's like Barack Obama's connection to Billionaires. It's just like, yeah, sure, they are, and so imagine if like George W. Bush was like this connected to like Nazis. Oh,
Yeah,
here's another fun fact.
seriously.
Here's a fun fact that you don't also maybe I didn't mention. Let's talk about how many degrees of separation connect Vice President Kamala Harris to the Reverend Jim Jones. How many degrees of separation would you expect there?
Three.
Malcolm?
Give how little what? Okay, go further.
Definitely not 3.
2.
No, come on, give it. We don't want to guess.
So Jim Jones has been written out of his actual history. He's been described as a sort of weird lone nut. Actually, he's a pillar of the 1970s San Francisco Democratic Party, which is the milieu out of which, of course,
people might not know who Jim Jones is. He's the guy who killed all those people in South America.
Jonestown. So Jim Jones ran a progressive interracial church. It was genuinely interracial, in which that consisted of basically ignorant poor black people and like rich socialites. And a match made in heaven. A match made in heaven, and it went to heaven. By the way, it was not Kool-Aid. It was Flavor Aid. Most people don't know this.
Oh, but no, that's extra insulting. No.
And we also are not told that Jim Jones was such a huge booster of the Soviet Union that his plan was always to escape to the Soviet Union, and he actually had the People's Temple treasury donated to the USSR in his will.
What?
Okay, believe it or not. But also, he was a pillar of the San Francisco Democratic Party, who he used to do like vote harvesting type things for.
Oh no.
And there's actually a quote from Kamala Harris's mentor, Willie Brown.
She
You
was
know,
in
you
her
might
20s
say
and he
she
was in her
came,
60s.
you might say she came up under Willie, as they say,
Oh,
and
God.
and
She was in her 20s and he was in his 60s. I just need to point that out. Okay, continue.
and yeah, I don't have any problem with age gap relationships, obviously, but you know you know there's a great quote from Willie Brown about Jim Jones, who you worked closely with, and that quote is. I forget the order of these. You'll find all these. This great City Journal article that you'll find all these. Yeah, Willie Brown said, "When I think of Jim Jones, I think of a combination of, I think the names were Albert Einstein, Martin Luther King Jr., Mao Zedong, and Angela Davis.
Oh my God.
Possibly not in that order. Is that a great list of names?
I
You think of those,
wish.
you know, and like even better. You ever been to San Francisco? It's a town. It's midway in California. And sometimes you ever fly into Terminal One? It's the Harvey Milk Terminal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What the document that I want to see, like a 5 by 8 feet blown up on the wall. I don't even want to change the name in Project 2025. You know, I want to like that's my, you know, I just want the picture on the wall, full image of the letter that Harvey Milk wrote to Jimmy Carter defending Jim Jones. Oh hell yeah. So,
No,
you know,
no, no,
yeah,
no, 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 no.
absolutely. You'll find this image, and actually, he's not just defending Jim Jones. He's defending Jim Jones' right to basically take away this child who was basically claimed by his mother from his father and taken to Jonestown, who
Oh
later died
God.
in Jonestown.
Oh
Oh yeah,
God.
oh yeah,
Harvey Milk was such a monstrous
Let's
character.
not even
So
forget
I
Harvey
think a lot of
Milk's
people don't realize
underage
this.
boyfriend, who he raped and then killed himself. You know, and
So I was surprised by this, and I wanted to dig into it to see if this is some conspiracy or some sort of like far right insanity, or is this like a mainstream fact that's pretty accepted by everyone? And so Harvey Milk, if you don't know, there's been a movie made about him. There's a terminal named after him at the San Francisco airport. He is considered a very famous figure, and it is also very, very well known that when he was 33, he was in a relationship with Jake McKinney, who at the time was 16 years old. The core defense of this that I have seen from leftists is, well, in many US states, age of consent is 16, so this is okay. But it wasn't 16 in California where they were, it was 18. It does appear that his accusations of rape are overblown, unless you're just talking about statutory rape, which I don't really consider rape. And then the second thing here is, did the guy end up unaliving himself over this relationship? Yes, he did. He ended up jumping off a ledge at 1980, February 14th. So, yes, it is true that Harvey Milk was a PDA file, was a 16-year-old who later ended up jumping as a result of this.
I don't know, here's the thing. Here's the thing. In Chinese history, okay, in Chinese history, whenever you have a regime change in Chinese history, that's a change of dynasty.
Okay.
And there was a sort of that happened enough that there's sort of a kind of meta dynasties regime in a way sprung up in China, where there were like, this was how you handled that. Every dynasty was supposed to be eternal, of course, but this is how you handled that. And the way you handle that is the first thing that every new regime, every new dynasty does is hire basically more historians than God in order to write the history of the previous dynasty.
Yeah. Yes. Of
Which, of
course.
course, is born gloriously and finishes, and born neutrally, really. Like, you can praise it, but it finishes in like complete ignominy. Okay. And right, the point is that when it comes time for the future to describe the present, it ain't gonna be hard. It ain't gonna be hard.
I mean,
Here's the thing, we win. I can look at who's having kids, and I can be like, I know what the history books are going to say about the president. It's going to be non-charitable in the extreme about the people who.
Yeah, it's going to basically say, it's going to be like very simple. Like, there were, white people build big ruin, all gone, big ruin, full of decaying bats.
I don't even think that. I think
Were you
the
saying,
wokeness
like,
and
people
the
that
urban
have
monoculture.
and then over there, Amish country, bad, no go. I don't know.
No, I think that the wokists and the urban monoculture are going to be treated in history the same way that the Germans are treated in Roman history. It's like, yeah, there were these people who kept attacking us randomly, but they're basically savages. Write them out of history.
Well, no, actually, if you look at the way Tacitus treats the Germans, it's actually somewhat different from that, because Tacitus is actually recognizing, as well as the barbarity of the Germans, he's recognizing their superiority. And he's basically sees like, wow, these Germans are faithful to their wives, the way we Romans used to be. Wow, they actually remind us a lot about the way legend tells us we Romans were in like 600 BC. Right. Actually, modern anthropology has basically figured out that this is true. And this is because the Romans in 600 BC were basically fucking Yamnaya 6'6" blonde gods from the steppes, right? Like the Germans of his day. And, they just got diluted by what the Nordic peoples called the thrall caste, right? And so, actually, when you look at basically who fits that description today, what sort of foreign and like deeply alien people do we see today that are in some ways superior to us? How could we write a kind of new Tacitus? And then I'm like, well, I could always start talking about the Moscow Metro, you know.
Wait,
We
what's
could
the
always do
Moscow
the
Metro? I have no idea what
the
this is.
Moscow Metro is a clean subway in Moscow, which is a place in Russia.
Okay.
Okay, it is a clean, attractive subway.
He's referring to the
Again,
actual Moscow Metro. It's not like a
yeah,
euphemism. It's
the
just the
actual
Metro in Moscow.
Moscow Metro. I would basically be like, wow, these people are really kind of barbaric in some ways, but in other ways they actually kind of seem superior.
Dude, anything compared to Bart, I'm sorry, is gonna look like you can eat off the floors. I just don't know what to say.
Well, then you've been to New York, right? I'm sorry, but you've been to New York. You
Okay.
can't eat off the
Okay,
floors in New York.
touche.
But
Yeah.
but even in
Rat
Paris, it's
can.
like you even compare the Paris Metro to the Moscow Metro, and I'm hardly setting foreign policy for the new Trump Vance administration. That will obviously be set by Czech's phone, Marco Rubio. However, if I was, somehow appointed as Secretary of State, which seems quite unlikely at this point, I think I have a somewhat Tacitus inspired. Or maybe it's inspired more by Charles Maurras. I don't know. But, my foreign policy is very simple toward Russia. Okay. I believe that we should draw a red line in the sand. It's a very strong policy. People have accused me of being a Russia simp. This is not true at all. Okay. I believe that the incoming president, needs to make a strong statement to Vladimir Putin. He needs to say, we've drawn a line in the sand. And beyond this line, Mr. Putin, no aggression will stand. We said that to Saddam Hussein, by the way. Do you want to be in a spider hole like Saddam? Didn't think so. Right? So beyond this line, no aggression will stand. And, and when I say that line, it reminds me of another great line in American history by another great president, also a very charismatic man, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And in 1937, something like that, he said this thing to reporters, which he later denied, but he definitely did say it. He said, America's frontier is on the Rhine. How does that sound?
Oh my God.
America's frontier is on the Rhine. So we're doing it by rivers. He did. So we're doing it by rivers, or at least bodies of water here. So, if we look at kind of the current policy, the policy of my predecessor, we might say America's frontier is on the Dnieper. Or excuse me, Dnipro. So you could go that far, okay? But that's even farther than the Rhine. Now, my view is farther east. Now, my view is, times have changed. It's a different world. It's not 1945 anymore. And I think I know where America has to draw her red line against Russian aggression. That's the English Channel. Okay, and when I say the English Channel, I mean the English Channel. For example, Hitler,
Oh my God.
Hitler crossed that line.
Oh
Most
my
people
God.
don't know this. Hitler took Jersey. Hitler took Sark, not New Jersey, but Sark. Okay, so the thing is, when I say the Channel, I mean the Channel. Hands off Sark, Mr. Putin. Okay, if one Russian
No, Sark. You draw the line at Sark.
Sark, I draw the line at Sark. The airspace over Sark. We will shoot it down. We will shoot it down, Mr. Putin. But the thing is, if you want to clean up Paris, Is it?
No,
I mean,
we did.
you're gonna get Malcolm's gonna have to agree. He's not
No,
a big
really
you
my
fan.
problem, is it?
show
And in
hate
fact,
how
you know,
anti-German we are and how anti-French we are, and I'm like, but why would we save them? Like, what have they given us in the past 50 years? And they're like, oh, the German people have a great, and I'm like, yeah, and the great ones left.
No. I totally disagree with that. I think two things: cars and wine. Okay, and also the space program. Let's not forget.
Yeah,
Let's not
wine,
forget that when an American set foot on the moon, that's true. He was an American, although he was a white man. But it was the Nazi space program who put that man on the moon. And directed by the same director, Werner von Braun. And so like
Directed by the
basically,
same, wait, was it the same people?
yeah. Oh yeah. The army tried to have a program of their own, but their first rocket crashed, and they were just like, "We're gonna park a couple of hundred Nazi rocket scientists in Alabama, and not give them access to any Jews or anything, and they're gonna put a man on the moon, an American on the moon." But like a very blonde, like Nazi-looking American.
Oh my God.
And
Program was this?
the American space program, the Apollo program, it was directed by Werner von Braun. That's why, the Tom Lehrer lyrics, like, as the rockets go up, who knows where they come down? It's not my department, says
Oh my
Werner von Braun. He was literally the director of both the V2 program and the Apollo program.
Oh, there you go, Malcolm. That
Well,
and
there you go.
Gewürztraminer. Yeah.
There you
Great
go.
thing
That
to
and
go on.
Gewürztraminer,
We're
right?
gonna get so canceled. You have too many. You are
all this stuff is on Wikipedia, right? Right? And
He brings
and
receipts, Malcolm. That's the problem.
I show you the receipts.
so
You
many
check the
receipts.
receipts. The receipts are real. It's just nobody sort of thinks about it. Like, nobody thinks that basically, like, oh, in the 60s, what is the 60s? The Apollo program and the Civil Rights Movement. Okay, realizing that the Apollo program is actually Nazi and the civil rights is literally Nazi, and the civil rights movement is literally communist. It's just like beyond anyone's ken when they process this period, and yet it's literally true. It's 2 clicks away in Wikipedia.
I can't
Right?
even.
They're communists and fascists in different senses, true,
can't
but like
even.
like as so as Faulkner
You are
said,
a thought criminal.
the past
You
isn't
deserve
dead.
to be a thought
The
criminal.
past isn't dead. It isn't even past.
Like, I'm talking to an actual thought criminal here. I want to be clear that we don't endorse any.
Absolutely
Oh.
not.
any of these
Absolutely
things.
not.
You can research
You're just,
yourself.
you're just to have respectable, clean.
That's
I mean,
us.
not The thing is, there's no honestly, there's no. Can we say the word? There's no such thing as eugenics. Okay, eugenics is just an absence of dysgenics. It's not a belief. It's the absence of a belief. And this is another thing from cladistics. It's called the negative predicate.
Okay.
Basically, you don't want to say, "Oh, this is the type of animal that doesn't fly."
Yeah.
And
That we're not birds. We're humans.
We're not birds. We're humans,
We're not
right?
genetically retarded. We're genetically not retarded.
Well, indeed. And as let me leave you with a couple of different observations. This is
I got
maybe
1
I've
minute
shared this
before I
one.
pick up the kids.
Okay, maybe this is an observation that you've heard before, but as a lot of people believe this old American idea that all men are created equal. And I'm just like, what if that's not? Well, what if it's like true in a sense, but we could make it truer? And I
Yeah.
came up with a way to make it truer. Okay, and that is we could say all identical twins are created equal. Isn't that true? That's really,
is
really
so
deeply true.
That is very
Again,
true.
it's not around the
Yeah.
margins. There's some differences, right? You can tell them apart. Let me leave you with something else, which is since we talked about history, this is a very short haiku written about 30 years ago on the internet by some friends of mine. I forget who wrote it. I didn't write it. And like all haiku, it needs to start with the essential first line of a haiku, which is the most cliched line possible, which is cherry blossoms fall.
Of course.
Of course. So let me leave you with a short yet resonant haiku that you will probably not forget. Cherry blossoms fall. 3 shots, 6.9 seconds. Brains in Jackie's lap.
Oh my God.
All right,
I'm sorry.
We need to go. I need to get the kid. Simone, stop laughing. I'm
Laughing.
I Curtis on the show. Our friend of the family. Your kids are
All
part of the
right, all
family.
right,
I'm
all
so glad
right,
to
all
see
right,
you.
all right, all right. Come.
And it's so weird that we haven't had you on yet. And we'll be. Hey, we're gonna be. CNN only got 500,000 viewers on election day. So getting 10,000 viewers per episode ain't so bad.
Not so bad. All right, all right.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll get it open for you. Do you see any eggs? Ah, we have 1, 2 new eggs. Yeah, 1, 2, and 2 new eggs. Okay. No, that's not a real egg. This is a real egg, though. And then you want to hold it? Yeah. You promise to not drop it? Okay, you have to hold very careful. 2 hands, 2 hands. Oh, here you go, buddy. All right, hold it with 2 hands and take it inside.